Hello, this is Vincent. Welcome to Dogma Discussions, my channel to discuss all kinds of dogma. Today I'd like to talk about the dogma of marriage. What is that? Well, hang in there with me and you'll find out. So like the video, share it, subscribe, and here we go. I was raised in a traditional, conservative religious household in which, at least by your late 20s, you should marry. Although, from the time I was 11 years old, I did not want it. As a preteen, I regularly told my dad that clearly, and he just laughed and responded, "Why didn't I think of that?" So why, as my dad later repeatedly reminded me with a laugh and a twinkle in his eye, did I marry twice? Why? I had felt, even as a young child, that it wouldn't work for me, and it didn't. I ended up twice divorced. Thus, why were my desires and actions incongruent? Answer: church and family dogma about the sanctity of marriage. That doctrinal programming, plus a couple of environmental factors, made me susceptible. The first factor was a crushing childhood loneliness. We had no family nearby, only my parents and brother in the household. The only people we saw regularly were folks in our very small church. Because of my parents' evangelicism, an anomaly in our very Catholic state, I wasn't allowed to bring friends home. Thus, I later realized that marriage was a choice I had made to combat that isolation that haunted my subconscious and influenced my decisions. Yet, I didn't realize how isolated one can feel in a marriage. I should have known this from my own family, for my mother, a traditional housewife, was incredibly lonely and reached out to the church's shut-ins to fill her days. My father, a strong John Wayne type, soothed his loneliness by constantly repairing things around the house. Yet the isolation he felt became obvious whenever another couple would visit, since he would talk more in an evening than I had heard him for months. Additionally, since my father was normally so quiet, our mother became a strong, dominating presence over myself and my brother, constantly haranguing us to find godly women and marry. And, being dutiful, we did. Not surprisingly for my brother, who was a devout Christian, but I, even though rejecting the religion, its seeds had sprouted in my subconscious, unbeknownst to me. You see, the church and my mother had raised my brother and me to believe that a man alone was not good. It's in the first book of the Bible, after all. It says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him.'" Here, a man receives two things from marriage: the comfort of not being alone and someone to relieve some of the pressure of life, having a helpmate, someone he can trust, rely on. Does marriage really give that, though, to either person? In my experience, perhaps for a while, but there's always the threat of divorce if the other person sees a better option or loses faith in you. In theory, you have another person with a vested interest in your success. But by showing vulnerability, either spouse chances looking weak and losing worthiness in the other's eyes. Thus, the threat of divorce is always there for both men and women, and each person in the coupling should realize that. Yet, having a helpmate is not the only reason to marry, according to the good book. In Isaiah, the prophet promises something divine for the couple. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so your God will rejoice over you. And what does God rejoicing over us imply? Well, what do humans want? Health, happiness, protection, security. So marriage will provide all of these? Does it? There are many good Christian people who struggle financially and or with health issues or are victims of crime. So, no, not necessarily. Proverbs promises sexual intimacy, a big motivator for many to marry. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. As a loving buck and a graceful doe, let her breasts satisfy you at all times. Be exhilarated always with her love. Now, this assumes that one's spouse will always seek to satisfy the other's carnal needs. In the old days, when women didn't have their own financial options and men were expected to stay and take care of their families, perhaps this was true. Yet now, there is no guarantee of sex in marriage, and I'm not saying that there should be. Thus, for either partner driven to marriage by the idea of guaranteed sexual intimacy, think again, for desire tends to wane over time, and as Chaucer wrote in the 1300s, familiarity breeds contempt. I saw this clearly exhibited by a couple at a work Christmas party several years ago. Generally, I am loath to attend these, but my wife at the time asked me to go with her, and I did. And at this one, a particular couple named Ken and Angela caught my attention. I learned later that they had been married for several years. Remember Chaucer? My wife worked with Angela, so Ken was new to both of us. Yet, that didn't matter. It was their interactions that captivated me. While my wife visits with her friends in another room, talking about work and other shared interests, none of which captivates me, I remain in the living room with the people who are asocial and just enjoy drinking. And to people watch. Ken and Angela, in this instance. Let me take you to that moment. Both are young, in their 30s, and good-looking. She, slender, well-dressed, and accessorized. He, chiseled facial features and muscular. They seem, physically at least, like they belong together, looking like the stereotypical all-American couple from a magazine ad. Periodically, one of the living room tribe pipes up about sports or some current event, and a few mumble responses, then return to drinking. But not Ken and Angela. They quietly sit on a love seat that rests against a wall, facing the rest of the room like they are on a stage for the entertainment of all present. Staring at the floor vacantly, Ken's sculptured arms rest on his thighs as his hands slowly ring each other. Once in a while he sighs, sits up, places a seemingly caring hand on his wife's back, and asks if she needs anything. She, in response to his touch, recoils subtly but noticeably and scoots another inch away, declining his offer while encouraging him to feel free to get something for himself. Ken's eyes uncertainly dart from hers to the hallway, then back to the floor as he removes his hand, returning his arms to his knees with a heavy sigh. This scenario repeats about every 15 minutes for the next hour and a half, until, sadly for my viewing pleasure, my wife wants to leave. Ken and Angela are still there as we thank our host and exit the house. I guess that they would rather stay than return home alone together. In the car, I relay what I had observed to my wife, to which she responds, "Oh, they're having problems." Then, after a pause, during which I remain silent, she explains something about one of them was ready for children, the other not, and something about a general lack of compatibility. Yet, that image of them sitting there has haunted me ever since. He reaching out, her repelled by his touch. And that's not to say that Ken was an innocent victim and she a persecutor. I don't know their story. What's important to note is that marriage is not some predetermined success blessed by God. It only lasts if both want it and are willing to compromise to make it work. But honestly, how often does that happen long term anymore? Only if neither have other options or choose to ignore them. You see, marriage is a contract, an agreement. We couch it in the idea of love and spirituality, but in truth, love is an illusion. The initial attraction and arousal is not love, it's hormones. What we should call love develops from mutual respect and acceptance, from commitment to each other and a daily decision to preserve the relationship. It's about a willingness to meet each other's needs while standing up for our own. Yet, these days, it's a rare thing to find two people willing to do that for years or a lifetime. That's why people should reject the dogma that marriage is somehow special and see it for what it is. It's about mutual goals and commitment. And the institution might have a better track record if, instead of looking for someone to marry and then committing to make it work, as people did in prior years, perhaps we should now look for compatibility first, then decide. I've since been Ken, reaching out and being rejected by a wife of many years who wants a divorce. It's hurtful and confusing until one accepts that it was special and intoxicating in the past, but now it's over, and that the only option is to just let it go. That's my story for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please like the video, subscribe, share it with others, leave me a comment. Until next time, this is Vincent. Goodbye.